Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my thorough review of the new Sigma 24-70mm F2.8 DN, which means it's designed for mirrorless, and it is in their art series. This, of course, is for Sony FE along with Leica L, and it is part of Sigma's ongoing development towards full-frame mirrorless lenses for some of the leading systems. This joins the Sigma 14 to 24mm f2.8 DN Art Series lens as the second in what I suspect will be a trilogy of, standard wide aperture zoom lenses. And certainly it's very welcome here. Now, today's video is divided up into some specific parts where we look at the build and handling, where we look at the autofocus, where we look at the image quality as well. And so if you would like to jump to any of those sections, there is timestamps in the description down below. If you're more interested in just getting the general overview, I do have a quick review video that will be coming at the end of the week that will allow you to just get kind of the highlights and a quick synopsis. So stay tuned for that. Now, the Sigma 24-70mm f2.8 Art is a welcome addition to the Sony FE lineup because it gives more of a direct competitor to the G Master lens, which is considerably expensive. It's twice as expensive as this particular lens, which comes to market retailing at $1,099 US compared to $2,199 US for the GM lens. And so we have got a half-price lens, and it prices it just about $220 above the price of the Tamron 28 to 75mm f2.8 RXD lens. Now, that lens has been very well received. In fact, it has been, since its release, one of the best-selling lenses, period, in the world. And so it's been very popular. At the same time, as much as I like the lens, I'm filming on it at the moment, it obviously isn't a direct competitor to the 24 to 70mm for the simple reason that 28mm is not 24mm, as we'll see in just a few minutes. So we're going to start off by taking a look at what you're getting here when it comes to the build and design, and we'll see why this lens, the Sigma, is a little bit more of a direct competitor to the G Master when it comes to the build and the feature set. Let's take a look. So Sigma has touted the fact that they've been able to build a smaller and lighter lens here for Sony FE. That is kind of true. It is actually a longer lens by about 15 millimeters, 122.9 millimeters compared to 107.6 millimeters. And it has almost an identical diameter, basically 88 millimeters in diameter. It shares the same front filter thread of 82 millimeters, and so at this point you may be forgiven in asking, well, that's not smaller at all. But it isn't smaller, it is lighter, however. It weighs in at 835 grams or 1.84 pounds compared to 1,020 grams for the Canon EF version, which is 2.24 pounds. Now, at the same time, to be fair, the Canon EF version had to include an optical stabilizer as a part of the formula, whereas the Sony FE version can rely on the in-body image stabilization. So that accounts for at least some of the difference. We do have a nice degree of weather sealing, starting with a gasket at the lens mount. There is they don't specify the name of it, but there is a dust and oil moisture resistant coating here on the front that will also help prevent some scratching. And I count a total of 8 seal points in the lens according to the diagram that is shown here. And so first of all, we're starting off with a nice degree of professional grade moisture resistance weather sealing in it. Now, while this is a familiar Sigma art physical design that I think most of us are familiar with, it does feel very robust. It feels well made. It is, of course, when you compare it to the Tamron, it definitely feels more professional grade. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with the Tamron's build, but it does feel a little bit more, plasticky by comparison, even though it also is, weather sealed. And again, it's physically fine, but the Sigma definitely feels more professional grade. Although, as we'll see in a moment, there is some trade-off in terms of the weight and size when it comes to that. Now, they're also, unlike the Tamron, which has no external buttons or switches, we do have several such switches here. There is a AF/MF switch, which I'm always happy to see. And the Sigma lenses are the first any kind of third-party lens to focus or to have the focus hold button. So nice to see that there. There is actually a zoom lock here that can help with that. Now, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any tendency towards zoom creep, but anyway, that lock is going to help to make sure that is the case. Definitely more robust feeling rings here than what there is on the Tamron, although the Tamron's actual zoom ring is wider. There's definitely deeper ribbing and just kind of a more substantial feel to these rings. Now, I will note that the positioning of the zoom and focus rings are reversed on these two lenses. And so on the Tamron, the zoom ring is towards the front. Here on the Sigma lens, the zoom ring is towards the back. There's a little bit of resistance, extra resistance as you start off zooming, and it kind of smooths out as you go. On the Tamron, it's opposite direction for one thing, and you know, there seems to be just a little bit less of a zoom action. And so in terms of the distance there, you can see that the Tamron actually zooms less than what the Sigma does. The Sigma is 122.9 millimeters. The Tamron says it is 117.8 millimeters, and the difference is in the difference in the actual caps. The Sigma cap is really low profile. The Tamron's is thicker, and so you can see that variability come out there. And so, but definitely there is even more of a difference when the two lenses are zoomed, because the Tamron doesn't quite extend as much zooming. Now the Tamron has, you know, just a fairly basic hood here. It's you know, bayonet style plastic ribbed on the inside. The Sigma's hood is a little bit more robust. I mean, it's also plastic, but it does have a rubberized transition here, and it also has a lock. I don't know if that's considered to be a factor for yourself, but some people prefer it. Other people, I mean, the Tamron bayonet's tight enough that, you know, unless it's really knocked, it's not going to move. However, the lens hood there does have a locking mechanism that helps it to stay stable. Now, you'll see that the difference in the width of the two lenses is really exaggerated when the lens hood is attached. The Sigma's lens hood is it's big, robust, and so it extends the width of the lens out even wider. Now, even without that, it is significantly wider than what the Tamron is. The Tamron has a front filter thread of 67 millimeters. The Sigma is a much larger 82 millimeters, and the threads there at the front. So a big difference when it comes to that. The overall dimensions by comparison are 87.8 millimeters in diameter for the Sigma, compared to only 73 millimeters for the Tamron. Now, in this case, the actual difference in the diameter of the lenses does have some kind of real-world significance outside of just the filter sizes. The fact that the Tamron is kind of a long and slender lens means that it avoids a common problem on Sony, in that because of the shape of the grip and that there's not enough width in between the actual lens mount and the grip itself, you end up a lot of times with your knuckles kind of pressed in. The Tamron's slim profile makes that less of an issue. However, if we mount the Sigma on here, it is a much wider lens, and as you can see, there's a lot less room in there to get one's fingers in there. Also, you're very close to the actual zoom ring there while doing that, and so if you have thicker fingers, even more so than my hands, you may have a little bit of an issue when it comes to that. Now, like the Tamron, the Sigma actually has two maximum magnification figures because it has two minimum focus distances, one on the wide end at 24 millimeters, where it can actually focus down considerably closer and can produce a 0.34 times magnification. On the telephoto end, it actually can't focus down nearly as closely, and so as a result, it has a much lower 0.22 times magnification. So that's pretty similar to the Tamron. They share the same figure on the wide end. The Tamron is a little bit better at 75 millimeters, where it has a 0.25 times magnification. Both of those figures, however, best the Sony GM lens. It has a 0.24 times magnification. And just to give you an idea how the weight compares to the GM lens weighs 886 grams, which compares to 835 grams for the Sigma. So while it doesn't qualify as both smaller and lighter than the DSLR version, it is lighter, as we've seen. But I think more importantly, it is a bit shorter, and it is definitely a bit lighter than what the G Master lens is. And so that, I think, is probably the major concern. Really, if smaller and lighter is your priority, then the Tamron still remains the better choice when it comes to that. However, as far as the overall robustness of feature set and build, this is definitely at a cut above, and certainly is a lot of lens for the price point that is being sold at. Now let's talk for a moment about autofocus. Sigma has done a great job so far with these lenses that are designed specifically for mirrorless, and so they've got stepping linear type motors that are quick and quiet, and that remains to be the case here. So first of all, let's quickly take a look at the sound involved and the smoothness in doing focus pulls for video. So as you can see, very smooth and most importantly, completely silent. Even though the lighting conditions were not particularly bright, we saw that it went, consistently to the different focus pull points without any kind of hesitation. We'll compare that to how the Tamron performs in a similar situation. Now, while there isn't a huge difference there, I did feel like the Sigma was a little bit smoother in that transition. Now, when it comes to real-world stills, there's not really any difference that I could tell in focus speed, and both of them are basically completely silent in focus operation. The Tamron has received a firmware update or two along the way that maybe gives it a tiny bit of an edge in a few situations, one of which we're going to detail in just a moment. Let's take a look at focus accuracy when it comes to stills photography. So we'll take a look at autofocus consistency and accuracy here. So overall, I'm going to get the kind of the bad news out of the way first. I mostly had a bit of a challenge in getting focus in some of these type situations, which if you follow my work, you know this is a pretty common type shot, particularly in the winter. There's only so many things with color on them, so I try to shoot these leaves like this. And so this is actually on a Sony A9, so it's a great focusing camera. And I had a hard time getting focus in these kind of situations. And so here, it wouldn't automatically pull on this, so I put a flexi point over here. But as you can see, focus is still not really all that fantastic. And so it's something about that kind of closer up performance. And so this is a sharp lens, but you wouldn't know it from looking at this image just because focus is not really nailing in that kind of setting. The other thing I will observe that's also a little bit of a negative is that when I got close here, and this is obviously the closest focus distance is found on the wide end. And so I'm on the wide end trying to get very close to this. I was never able to get a really fantastic handheld, close focus shot over the shots that I shot throughout my review period. And so, I mean, I'm using the same technique I do with many lenses. It's very rare, obviously, for me to have a tripod out in this kind of setting. So I want to be able to use the lens like this. And so I haven't been necessarily impressed with the close-up focus performance for the simple reason that I've just found it hard to get a shot that I love that's really, really crisp and shows off the detail up close, even though I know the lens is capable of, reasonable performance there. Now, on a much more positive note, IAF, both for humans and pets, worked really, really great. I mean, I got no misfocused images out of dozens that were shot. I got none that were misfocused. IAF was just really, really consistent. Here I put my daughter in a, where I had lots of layers of other things that could have grabbed focus, but IAF went just right on and nailed focus. And so no hesitation when it comes to the IAF performance. Very, very consistent, as you can see from all these images. Likewise for pet IAF, even in poor lighting situations, as you can see here, this is not a brightly lit scene. However, I was able to get really accurate IAF results on my cat here. You can see that this is the eye that was grabbed. It is perfectly in focus. Even though I shot over several layers, kind of a very low down to the ground, it did a great job. Equally in low light situations, I had no hesitation. Focus was good. And this is kind of a little bit brighter of the two scenarios, but even when I switched over to the really dark room, I was able to grab focus very, very quickly and consistently. And so no hesitations on its ability to focus in low light. So the one area I mentioned that the Tamron may have a little advantage is in those close focus situations. That was initially an issue for the Tamron as well, one that they fixed via firmware, and so I have every confidence that Sigma would be capable of doing the same thing. But that was the only negative that I could point to as far as focus, and I was impressed by the low light focusing capabilities. It certainly is doing a good job there as well. When it comes to overall video performance, I didn't see any kind of jumpiness. I have actually filmed a couple of my segments and video reviews that I have released. For example, the Sony FE 200 to 600 millimeter videos I shot with the Sigma. I got smooth results, no complaints there. And as you can see from this footage, it's certainly capable of producing, beautifully detailed footage as well. And so no hesitation when it comes to the video performance. This, of course, is a very, very flexible focal length for doing video with. The fact that it is a little bit heavier and a little bit longer, the balance point isn't going to be quite as easy as the Tamron if you're working from a gimbal. So you're just going to have to kind of make a determination based on your actual usage points as to which lens would work better for you. Both of the lenses do offer up in-camera corrections for video, and so vignette and distortion are going to be corrected for in-camera. Now, of course, I recognize that a lot of you are most interested when it comes to the actual optical properties of the lens. And so I will throw in a few comparison points with the Tamron here, but mostly we want to evaluate how it performs in an absolute sense. And so let's jump in and let's take a look at some photos together. Well, let's start by taking a look at the distortion and the vignette that is here. I'm going to cycle this off so you can see a little bit better. You can see that there is a fairly clearly pronounced barrel distortion here with a slight bit of a mustache pattern. However, it mostly is the bulge in the center of the frame. We can see on the right we have the JPEG out of camera, and so it has received camera corrections. And we can see that the distortion is fairly well, but not completely resolved here. And the vignette has been lifted. There's definitely some obvious vignette across the frame. And that vignette, I think, is corrected partly here, probably could even use a hair more. Unfortunately, there isn't yet a profile in Adobe Lightroom where I am doing my edit here, and so we can't see how a raw correction would do. Now, if we look at real-world images, you can see, for example, here that the vignette is fairly obvious. This is actually at 70 millimeters. And then here we can see at 24 millimeters that even with the horizon, not quite center, but, kind of rule of thirds, we can definitely see there is a bulge there from the barrel distortion. So definitely those distortions will show up if uncorrected. Now, if we compare to the popular Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter, now the Tamron does have the advantage that there is a profile correction available for it. Obviously, it's been out for a while. I have removed that profile, so you're seeing an uncorrected result here on the right side. So you can see, I'm going to cycle the writing back off. You can see that the distortion is less pronounced on the Tamron. It's more mild. However, to be fair, 28 millimeters is not 24 millimeters, and so definitely not as complicated to correct for. We can also see that there is a little less vignette on the Tamron as well. One final thing worth noting is the difference between 24 millimeters and 28 millimeters, because it is significant. And so here you can see the framing at 24 millimeters, and you can see how much tighter the framing is on the Tamron at 28 millimeters. And so it certainly is a significant difference. So if we look at the center of the frame here on these two lenses, the Tamron shows a little bit more contrast and resolution punch in the center of the frame than what does the Sigma. If we start to cycle off in this direction, we can see that that is still true, though to a lesser degree. Now the Sigma looks basically, I would say, a bit better here. And as we move on into this area, you can see there's a little bit more contrast towards the corner, and this is resolved a little bit more with a little better. In the extreme corner, the Tamron looks just a hair better, but that's more to do, I think, with a lack of vignette than it is anything else. Now here is a real-world 24mm f2.8 image that I shot on the A7R Mark III, which I'm using for these tests. However, here I have gone and done a little bit of edit just to kind of show you what you can produce. As you can see, once you've corrected for the aberrations, this is a beautifully sharp result here, resolving great across the frame. And so, I mean, I'm pretty delighted with that end result. Also here we have a portrait shot at 24 millimeters and f2.8. You can see there's lots of resolution and contrast, a very nice result. And also I will note in this particular setting, I think that that is a fairly decent amount of three-dimensional kind of cutout there. And so the lens is certainly sharp at 24 millimeters f2.8. So we see if we compare f2.8 to f4 that, there definitely is, there's some improvement of vignette, but not a significant amount. And so vignette is still definitely an issue. We can also see that at f4, contrast has improved and more competitive in that area. And just taking a quick peek down in this zone, we can see that there's a little bit more improvement there. Some of it is vignette, but also that's a little bit crisper in the numbers. And the moving down in this area, you can see a moderate amount of vignette lift, but also some improved contrast and resolution. It's making the corner look a little better. We can see a bit more vignette lift at f5.6, a little more brighter in result. And we can see still a little bit more uptick in terms of our resolution. Everything is really, really crisp now. And now if we move off into this corner, you can see that there is an improvement there of improved contrast even right into the corner. Now at 35 millimeters, we can see that the barrel distortion has turned to a little bit of a pincushion distortion. And you can see the corrected JPEG on the right. We can see that vignette is a little less pronounced. However, there is still some there. And so at 35 millimeters, we have a fairly near perfect correction, a good result there. Now, if we can compare to the Tamron here on the right side, one trend that I noted, as you can see here, that to frame equally, the Tamron actually needed a little less zoom typically than what the Sigma did. And so there's just a minor variance there, about a millimeter in their zoom range and their framing. But consistently, the Tamron framed maybe a little bit tighter than what the Sigma did. And so as far as the distortion pattern here, there's a little less. I'll cycle that off again. You can see there's a little bit less distortion here. So it's basically neutral, the Tamron, while there's a little bit of pincushion on the Sigma. Now, if we take a look in the center of the frame, I would say that both lenses are really, really similar. There's not a whole lot of difference to appreciate here. Moving into this zone, also about equal. This zone, a little bit of an edge for the Sigma maybe, and moving off into the corner, I do think getting out to the corners that the Sigma has a very slight edge. Once again, if we take a look at a real world result here, you can see, really, really nice, good resolution there, very crisp, contrasty, and a nice overall rendering to the image. If we stop it down to f4, you can see there's a bit of vignette lift here. We can also see there is a little bit of an uptick in contrast there in the center of the frame. In this area here, just a little bit crisper, and moving off towards the corner, we can see that there is a little bit more detail that's rendered there. And so some improvement and a similar minor amount of improvement at f5.6, but this is a really fantastic result. Now, if we take a look at 50 millimeters here, we can see that there still is some pretty obvious pincushion distortion. The JPEG correction corrects it fairly well in camera, so we have an even result. You can see that there still is some vignette that's affecting this, and we see a vignette lift. And it seems like the whole image maybe receives some brightness, so it's not a massive amount of vignette in terms of really dark corners, but you can tell it extends fairly far into the frame. So again, we can see that there is almost a millimeter difference in terms of the framing. Not a big deal, but just to point that out compared to the Tamron. And we can see that both lenses have a roughly equal amount of pincushion distortion at 50 millimeters. Now, if we take a look at the comparison of our resolution here, we can see that both of them look crisp in the center. The Tamron has a very, very slightly brighter image, and that could be less vignette penetration into the center of the frame. Both of them look very crisp throughout this zone. Tamron might have a very slight edge here, wide open at 50 millimeters in those zones. And I would say moving off into the corner, you can see we got just a little bit more resolution and contrast compared to the Sigma that's a little bit muddier. Fortunately, at f4, we see that that corner starts to sharpen up, and just moving back over here, you can see some improved contrast. And moving back into this zone, there's less of a difference there in the center of the frame, a little bit better contrast, but mostly it's in the corner that we start to see the improvement. So finally at 70 millimeters, if we can compare with the JPEG, we see that there remains to be some pincushion distortion. There is some vignette, though the vignette is not as pronounced as what we have seen. Once again, the correction does a pretty good job, almost perfect, of correcting that in the in-camera JPEG. If we can compare to the Tamron, Tamron of course reaches to 75 millimeters, so a little bit further reach. We can see that they have a fairly similar amount of distortion and a fairly similar amount of vignette here. Now interestingly, it's at this end of the range that the Sigma shows its strongest advantage over the Tamron, and so we can see that at 70 millimeters compared to 75 millimeters, but at f2.8 it definitely shows higher levels of contrast. You can see that it resolves better. You can see looking at this zone, it's definitely crisper on the Sigma, and if we look off into the corner, even in the corners, there is a little bit brighter, better contrast, and so it has the advantage at 70 millimeters. And that shows up once again in a real world portrait here, 70 millimeters. We can see we've got a beautifully crisp result. We've got, a nice, transition to our defocused area, and so everything here looks quite good. If we can compare f2.8 to f4, we see an ever so slight improvement in terms of our contrast. And you can see it here moving off towards the corner. You can see everything kind of brightening up and a little bit more intense. But this is already very good at f2.8, and it just gets mildly better at f4 and f5.6. Here's a real world handheld shot, f5.6, 70 millimeters. You can see beautiful acuity here, A7R Mark III, resolving right out to the frame, great detail, and of course a great mood in the shot, and so a really, really great result. So if we take a look at chromatic aberrations, longitudinal chromatic aberrations, we can see that they are definitely present. You can see both some evidence of some purple and then a little bit of green fringing. And so not completely controlled, and looking to the defocused area, you can see a little bit of outlining, purple outlining, kind of a purple blue outlining of some of this, along with some kind of prismatic type noise. So while there is nothing, glaring here, there definitely is some vulnerability when it comes to longitudinal chromatic aberration. So how about Coma performance? Well, as you can see, you're able to get a nice detailed sky here. Star points look fairly crisp, not the best that I've seen, but fairly good. And as we can see, while there is some stretching, and you can see definitely a little bit of wings towards the edges themselves, it's not like extremely pronounced either, and so we'll give this an average rating. Nothing exceptional, but nothing particularly poor either. Here's a second composition, so it allows us to, for one thing, see a few kind of galaxy clusters out there, which is always interesting. But also here we've got some bright points right near the corner, so it allows us to see kind of extreme case, and you can see that it's not perfect, but at the same time it's not awful either. And so anyway, certainly if you purchase this lens, don't hesitate to use it in this scenario. Now, flare resistance is not necessarily a strength, and so here at 24 millimeters, it's actually a little bit better at 24 millimeters. You can see some ghosting artifacts, a little bit of localized veiling, not necessarily a huge deal. Stop down here, you can see the sunburst type pattern, and so remember, this actually has a really high blade count, 11 aperture blades, so kind of a unique kind of sunburst. So we get a little bit more of prismatic ghosting artifacts here, a fairly big one here, obviously some really pronounced ghosting. And so if you're stopping down, it's not fantastic. Here zoomed in a bit, you can see wide open. Again, we've got the generalized flaring and ghosting. And then if it's stopped down, that becomes more pronounced. And as we see with the video pan here at even wide open, there's definitely a lot of artifacts showing up there. And then stopped down, there is even more. And so flare resistance, not necessarily a strength here. So other than primarily the misstep when it comes to flare resistance, we've got actually a really strong optical performance. And by and large, I was really happy with the detail, the contrast, the color of the images that I took over my review period. They came out looking the way that I would want. And so I think overall we have actually got a strong performance. Definitely some pronounced barrel distortion there at 24 millimeters. That's, unfortunately, that's kind of part and parcel for lenses like this. And so, fortunately, it is correctable. However, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer for an in-camera, not an in-camera, but an in-software RAW profile, as that's not available yet. So in conclusion, we have got a lens that I think is, as I said, is going to be a very serious competitor to the Sony 24-70mm f2.8 G Master lens. A lot of people are going to have to ask themselves some serious questions as to what the G Master offers that this lens does not, and the list is extraordinarily short. The G Master may still have the slightest edge in autofocus in a few situations, but I doubt you're really going to see that. And certainly when it comes to the optical performance, I think the G Master may have a little bit smoother bokeh quality, but beyond that, there's really not a lot to separate these lenses. Certainly it would be hard to justify twice as much to go to the GM unless there is something in particular that appeals to you about that particular lens. So I think that Sigma has done what they needed to do. This is a better lens than what the EF version was. I found the EF version to not be fully competitive. In some areas when it came to the resolution, it wasn't as good as some of the competitors from Canon or even from Tamron with their G2 at the time when I did a three-way comparison there. I also found that the image stabilization was not as good compared to the Tamron's image stabilization. Fortunately, that's no longer part of the equation, thanks to their in-body image stabilization. And as we actually saw in one of those, that last low light shot, that shot was taken at 70 millimeters and 1/8 of a second, and yet it was very steady. And I found that I could get that fairly routinely. And so thanks to Sony for a great image stabilization system that frankly works better than what Sigma's own OS did in the Canon EF version. So at the end of the day, I think you're getting a lot of lens for the money, and if you don't mind a little bit larger bulk and weight, this is a lens, of course, that has a pro grade of build, has very good image quality, good autofocus performance, and I think is well worth your consideration. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you'll take a look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my full text review. There's also linkage there to the image gallery if you want to see more photos. Of course, remember that the quick review is coming as well, and beyond that, there's also linkage to follow me on social media, to become a patron, to sign up for my newsletter, and if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.